today's session is part of a 5-segment leadership series to bring a spotlight to this and really explore how neuroscience is reshaping the way that we approach human well-being, from my perspective, corporate cultures, and leadership. So today we're going to explore how neuroscience-informed coaching is really helping leaders to bring that science to life in their day-to-day, and how the humans that are involved in the workplaces can really drive that performance for the organizations as a strategic lever more than anything else. And I'm thrilled to be joined today and to welcome Dr. Liesl Keen, who has a PhD in neuroscience with transformational leadership coaching, and in fact wrote her thesis on this very topic, where she created her own model of neuroscience coaching. Well, it's our pleasure, Liesl. So perhaps you can start us off just by sharing, what is it that really personally thrills you with the work that you're doing?
I think it is because I can see the change that happens in people when you work from this perspective, as well as the speed at which this is working on an individual level, as well as how that then has a wider impact into a team perspective. And eventually, the more one can work with organizations from a neuroscience perspective, the organization itself, the culture can change, and we desperately need that.
Thank you to all of you who have joined, and also to all of the others who might be watching this after the live session today. Tricia has already introduced you a little bit about the work that I do, but on a sort of leadership perspective, I feel like we're at a sort of turning point, an encouraging turning point, let's say, in how we think about leadership within organizations. And I think for decades, we were focusing more on skills and KPIs and systems, which are, of course, still very important, but we're now starting to get a deeper understanding of human flourishing, and obviously using our brain, our nervous systems, and neuroscience to lead us there. I think we've seen that engagement and performance in the workplace has sort of been quite stagnant over the years. And now I think with this new approach, we can start to make shifts within these measurements in organizations. Today's world is constantly changing. We're facing, I suppose, one of the biggest current changes is through this digital transformations, with all the new technology and AI and everything coming into our workplaces and our lives at a rapid pace. But these always-on work cultures, we're seeing that a lot in the UAE, but also globally, with burnout and stress really influencing the way that we lead. So it really is becoming quite apparent that we do need more specific skills and more scientifically based practices in order to help us through. And hopefully in today's session, we're going to be uncovering some of that. As Tricia mentioned, today's talk or session is part of a 5-segment leadership series this month in celebration of World Applied Neuroscience Day, which we've turned into a month program to be able to cover as many topics as we can to bring a spotlight to this and really explore how neuroscience is reshaping the way that we approach human well-being, from my perspective, corporate cultures, and leadership. Tricia also mentioned that I'm also running the special interest group around brain health and the workplace. So if any of you are interested in joining that, there's more information on the ANA website. And I would be delighted to have more people joining, because I would love to turn it into a place where we can meet, discuss, collaborate, perhaps on different research projects, etc. But I don't know how you all feel if you're working with workplaces and with leadership, but I really feel that there is a growing movement in organizations One of them is to try to stay as competitive as possible, but really understanding this need to deepen their leadership skills, to improve, our neural capacity. And when we talk about the brain economy and brain capital, because they are really at the fundamental part of resilience and our emotion regulation, which plays such an important role in how we get on with others and how we are able to free our minds up for all that cognitive work that they are required to do on a day-to-day basis. And also that resilience and adaptability that we seek now more than ever because of all the changes that we're going through. So today we're going to explore how neuroscience-informed coaching is really helping leaders to bring that science to life in their day-to-day, and how it can support them in building cultures where both the humans that are involved in the workplaces can really drive that performance, for the organizations as a strategic lever more than anything else. And I'm thrilled to be joined today and to welcome Dr. Liesl Keen, who has a PhD in neuroscience for transformational leadership coaching, and in fact wrote her thesis on this very topic, where she created her own model of neuroscience coaching. So today we are going to learn more about the work that she's doing, the work that she did in obtaining her PhD, and hopefully walk away as well with some practical elements and at least a deeper understanding of how this can be very supportive in our leadership. So welcome, Liesl. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Maria. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity today. There's so much in this field that's developing, so it's so exciting, and it's fantastic to see associations like this ensuring that the knowledge gets out there. So thank you very much as well, and I hope it will be beneficial to those attending.
Well, it's our pleasure, Liesl. So perhaps you can start us off just by sharing a little bit about your own journey into this space and where your interest in neuroscience as a coaching modality began.
Okay. I am trained as a psychologist and worked in human resources for quite a long time in corporate career, and lived in South Africa, worked there, and moved to the UAE, worked in Abu Dhabi in the government for a few years. And my husband and I decided to move to Ireland, and my career changed. I went from a corporate HR individual to going into coaching and leadership development. And I met a professor at UNISA, which is the University of South Africa, Professor Dirk Geldenhuys, who brought the concept of applied neuroscience, but specifically neuropsychotherapy, to the university. And I have already started to see a lot about neuroscience coming up when I read. I saw it's coming into my field of organizational psychology. And bringing it together with coaching is something that him and I decided is a unique concept to explore. And a thesis or a PhD came out of that. So that is really how that journey came about. And it has been life-changing, coming from a pure psychology or organizational psychology background. Moving into that space really has changed the lens that I see organizations through, the perspective that I have on leadership. And a lot of what you mentioned in the introduction today, Maria, already is related to that change and what we are dealing with in leadership today in organizations. And more, as I get to know the subject deeper, besides just the research that I've done, but also the interaction, seeing how these modalities, approaches work with leaders, I am feeling stronger and more confident about the success it is going to have in organizations. So yes, that's in a nutshell how I got to this point, from an HR perspective to a more holistic leadership neuroscience orientation. And it helps to have that HR background because it really do provide some insight as to what leaders really deal with as well, what organizational challenges they are facing and how that has really evolved over, I would say, 20 to 25 years that I've been working with it. So very interesting, very exciting times that we have. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. And it's wonderful as well that you mentioned this kind of deeper emotional connection by the leaders. And I wanted to ask you as well, just to try to keep this very scientific topic as human as possible, and just a little bit about this, the bigger why for you. What is it that really personally thrills you with the work that you're doing?
I think it is because I can see the change that happens in people when you work from this perspective, as well as the speed at which this is working on an individual level, as well as how that then has a wider impact into a team perspective. And eventually, the more one can work with organizations from a neuroscience perspective, the organization itself, the culture can change. And we desperately need that. We desperately need those changes in organizations at this point. We need it systemically. We need it from an individual perspective, leadership as an individual leader, but into the team perspective and further through the constellations of the organization. That's really important. And I think that it's probably sometimes the effect is minimized by only using the techniques, the approaches, the concepts, and the knowledge of neuroscience only at an individual level, and it doesn't permeate throughout the organization. That, I would say, is something, if I have to say what more we can do, for sure, it needs to be extended at a full cultural level in organizations. But you asked me what makes me excited about it. It's definitely with regards to the reward that you get from working with individuals and in such a short space of time, seeing change take place. And I have to also add sustainable behavioral change, because that really is where neuroscience and neuropsychotherapy, in particular, from a coaching methodology, is very different, because there is more sustainable behavioral change because we're working at a neural level. We're changing at a neural level. And that is something that I think coaching really can do with to a great extent.
Yes. And, when I work with organizations, and I think all the data is pointing towards this too, with this really high levels of stress and burnout that we're seeing. I think the latest statistics from Gallup was something around 45% of people are feeling stressed every day. And I think here in the UAE, there's been data coming out closer to the 90s percentages around how people are experiencing regular stress and burnout symptoms. And I think, with this and the amount of expectations that leaders have today in this, hybrid work situations and constant change, this tech revolution, the emotional overload, and, so many different challenges for regulating ourselves, let alone the teams that we're driving, right? And so from your experience, what have been some of the biggest challenges, pain points that you're seeing with leaders specifically, or in organizations today? And maybe you can share a little bit how it's shifted over the years as well, as times are really changing, right?
Mm. No, definitely times have changed, and I would say probably since the pandemic times, it has accelerated in that change, and now we're facing also the effects of geopolitical impact, but AI as well, significant impact. Leaders at this point in time, I would say, yes, the burnout, it is a big thing. There's an overwhelm. There is an overwhelm that is emotional for many leaders, even though they may not realize it. And I think that's where our work is so extremely important. the workplace is still seen as a very structured place where maybe approaches such as ours are not always as easily received. It's seen as an approach that is maybe linked back to psychology. Why do we need this in the workplace? So there's definitely a lot of education required around this. But in terms of leaders, burnout is significant, definitely. There is overwhelm. There is a huge amount of complexity that leaders are facing with. And many leaders are, as a result of the stress that they are experiencing on a daily basis, they are stuck. They trying to get by, they are not thriving, they are not as effective as they should be. And that is because they do not have the strategies, they do not have the knowledge or the information available to them to make a difference or to even realize what is happening with them. They think they're doing okay, but they probably are not. And I have seen that with a lot of people. As a result of that level of stress, continuous stress and overwhelm and complexity that they have to deal with, they basically start to avoid going deeper into understanding themselves because it is challenging. I have noticed quite a lot of that where they are sent by an organization for coaching, for instance. The organization is seeing something completely different to what the individual is seeing. And that is as a result of the nervous system that is in a state of dysregulation, and it's understandable. And working through that and being able to open that up for leaders at this point, I think, is really important. Leadership has shifted from I am managing others to very much I am managing myself first before I can manage others and before I can manage my team and make an important and valuable impact in the organization. So I work a lot with leaders from that perspective, working on the self first. And a lot of the time there's an aha moment because they do not realize where they are at. They don't realize how burnt out they really are. So the concepts of neuroscience, especially through coaching, can create change quite quickly. And sometimes that is still a surprise to me, but it's also a really good experience for the leader because it's evidence-based, it's scientific. They also tend to accept what is happening in the session easier. Most definitely. But contextually, in organizations, I think leaders are really struggling at this point, and it has shifted where they probably had the ability to manage what is going on a lot more confidently. I think that there's a lot of loss of confidence as a result of the acceleration of change, as a result of the demands on them. And it's almost this deer in the headlights type of state that they have, and they're struggling to move forward. So therefore, they will go back to what has always worked, and they are not necessarily trying out new ways of leading. And it also results in leaders being a lot more in the seat of wanting to control what is going on because of the fear, because of the uncertainty, because of the fact that they don't really know what is happening and how to manage it. Very few organizations are equipping leaders effectively. And I think that we are at a point now where we can say that the old way of leadership development, classroom leadership courses, it isn't as effective as maybe thought before. It is not sustainable change. And here we definitely need to approach learning from different areas. We have to approach it from an individual perspective. Yes, we can teach leadership techniques. We can teach technical knowledge around leadership and strategy and so forth. But if we do not work with the leader at an individual basis, then we are going to miss an opportunity where leadership can grow and collectively can grow as the individual does.
Absolutely. And, you know, this is where the nervous system becomes such a key piece because you really can't build engagement and performance on top of dysregulation, right? And I think there's a lot of companies that are investing in coaching, but perhaps you can dive a little bit deeper into how neuroscience coaching takes it a step further.
Okay. So the work that I do, or the work that my PhD is based on, is neuropsychotherapy. So neuropsychotherapy is really a neurobiologically informed framework, and it affords coaching a unique opportunity because it works at a neuronal level in terms of behavioral change with the behaviors directly, and the approaches are quite unique. To some of them are quite unique. They are not the type of approaches that you're going to learn in a general coaching training. And because of the research that we have available, because of how neuropsychotherapy and applied neuroscience is changing, um, basically as a paradigm for psychology, of which coaching draws a lot, I think that there are quite a few of the previous models in coaching that are outdated. They are still being trained, but it is a new time for coaching as a result of what we learned from neuroscience. So, in terms of neuropsychotherapy, it provides a framework where we are working with the approach and avoidance schemata that is built throughout the lifetime of the individual from birth, related to the basic psychological needs. And I work with 4 specific basic psychological needs, which would be they're not they are not unique in terms of that they are neuroscience focused only. They do come from psychology as well, such as attachment, orientation and control, the need for orientation and control, which basically means you want to have the most options available to you in your life in order to make decisions. If that need is not satisfied, there's a violation of it. Stress results. Neural proliferation is stunted. The individual will struggle to find their way in terms of thriving. As a third one would be self-esteem, self-worth, the need to have a healthy self-esteem, pain avoidance, and obviously promotion of pleasure. And that's human. We want to avoid pain, we want to promote pleasure, but it comes through our upbringing. It comes through our entire lifetime. As we have had experiences, we develop these schemata that results in either avoiding a situation or approaching it. And many of the neuropsychotherapy coaching approaches work on that principle, as well as the principle of consistency, the prediction capability of the brain at the Hebbian principle, obviously, which is foundational. So the approaches in neuropsychotherapy coaching would include aspects of right brain to right brain coaching, for instance. And here I can say that, in particularly related to that, the models of goal setting for coaching, the models of solution orientated coaching, those do not align with what the neuroscience and the neuropsychotherapy practices and frameworks tell us. So there is a huge change. It's a paradigm shift, and I do find it sometimes difficult talking to coaches about this because it is new. It is a different way of approaching it. And obviously we have institutions such as various societies and training companies that still train the GROW model or those type of models. They are valuable under certain circumstances, so I'm not saying that they're not, but we do have new and updated information from a neuroscience perspective that we can now incorporate into coaching. And I think it's important for coaches to remain open-minded. I think it is important for leaders to remain open-minded because of the possibilities that we have available due to the research, due to the technology, the neuroscientific technology as well that we have available to do research these days. So it really is a paradigm shift. I suspect it will take quite some time before it will become mainstream. At the moment, a lot of it is still quite within the academics, within pockets of practitioners that have gone through the process of studying more about neuroscience and applied neuroscience.
Yes, and that's also the purpose with ANA, with the Applied Neuroscience Association, right? So bridging that gap between research and getting that research quicker into the hands of people who can apply it. So it's absolutely brilliant. We have a great question from Samantha. You touched on it a little bit. I mean, you've answered that yes, but perhaps if you had anything more to add to it, her question is, are you bringing attachment styles into your coaching, and how this systemically adds to later unresolved traumas that link to all facets of the lives, including work?
Yes. So my framework involves the 4 basic psychological needs that I mentioned, and one of them is attachment and attachment styles. Attachment styles have significant impact throughout life, and the development, and whether those are healthy or unhealthy, they have significant impact, especially on leaders. It has been shown that leaders that do not have healthy attachment styles, they struggle to develop trust with teams. They struggle to be able to manage the team effectively. When you consider the constructs of transformational leadership, they are unable to meet those fully because of unhealthy attachment styles. So yes, definitely, it often comes up. It often comes up in coaching leaders and teams as well. You can see it within teams, and the leader themselves struggle with their own behavior and don't understand their own behavior, and that is extended to the team. And we know about co-regulation. We understand that if the leader is regulated, then the team has a higher chance of being regulated as well, in terms of their stress levels and the safety that the leader is responsible for. So besides the fact that there is an attachment relationship between the coach and the coachee in the coaching session, which is of primary importance, there is the attachment style that extends beyond, outside of the coaching session, into the workplace, obviously. So if I can just very briefly talk about the relationship between the coach and the coachee. Besides attachment, which is extremely important, the aspect of safety within, and here I'm not talking just creating rapport with a coachee, I'm talking about full safety, where the coachee is completely at a point of where they can trust the coach. The probability of success from that coaching is much higher as a result of that, irrespective of the model that is used in the coaching. That particular aspect will drive the coaching success. And sometimes coaches excuse me, underestimate that value. It really is important. The moment that you meet your coachee or leader for the first time, there is interbrain synchrony, right brain to right brain, within milliseconds that takes place. That coupling is extremely important for creating a working alliance with the coachee. So that is something, if I can, if there's coaches present today, if there's one thing that you need to really try and get right, is that. Try and get that part really right, and everything else will flow a lot more easier from it. So yes, attachment style is extremely important. It follows the adults throughout their life. And that is that primary care relationship that we have from our birth. And yes, it needs attention, and it's valuable to make sure that that is as healthy as possible.
Absolutely. And it actually makes me think about trust and safety on a broader aspect too, about that psychological safety in the workplace. Maybe you can dive into a little bit more about what's actually happening within our brains and nervous systems when we have or don't have psychological safety in the workplace. So it's beyond the coaching relationship, but also how that transcribes from the leader onto their teams in creating those psychologically safe cultures.
Yes. Definitely. It comes back to stress activation, and we talk about the HPA axis, which is where the stress is originating from the limbic system. And we know this as practitioners from neuroscience that once that is activated, it is really difficult for the individual to be able to contribute in their team, for the leader to be able to make effective decisions. So leaders themselves need to have that level of safety within them, their own peer groups, obviously, but also extend it to their team. The research is clear that without that level of psychological safety, innovation, creativity is stunted. Employees struggle, they are afraid, there isn't empowerment. So they think that they're doing their job, but they probably can do even better from a cognitive perspective, because the brain shuts down the aspects of the prefrontal cortex in terms of where you need to have your clarity of thinking. And I would say that I work with, in my model of coaching, the approaches are aimed at creating homeostasis among the three main operating neural networks, which is the default mode network, the executive network, and the salience network. And when those three networks are balanced and they're working together congruently, then we have a much better chance of healthy functioning within the organization as a leader and within the organization as a team member, responding to others. So firstly, it really is important to start educating. We really need to create awareness in organizations, and it starts with the leader. And once the leader are able to work at this level, they can bring that information and the way of leading from a neuroscience perspective into the team that will bring that psychological safety through. So I think that there is quite a lot that leaders can benefit from in terms of neuroeducation, awareness, just understanding the brain, basic brain knowledge really is important for them. And when they start realizing what is taking place biologically, and this is the result of it, then they can start thinking from a different perspective as well. And this will really influence how they manage themselves as well as others. And as we spoke about in the beginning of our talk today, Maria, in terms of self-awareness, leaders are struggling with that because of the environments that they are working in, the complexity, the challenge, and the burnout, the continuous change, and obviously pressure from above and then pressure from their teams on them as well. So they're really in a difficult situation. They are getting it from all sides. And the knowledge and the techniques and the tools that neuroscience can bring to them is so valuable that I really do hope that through all the organizations in the world and the practitioners and academics, we can bring this more to the fore. Into the practice and into the organizations.
Yeah, it makes me think also about emotional intelligence and emotion regulation. And we've also got a follow-up from Samantha. So thank you so much, Samantha. And anyone else, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box, and we will get through those as well, hopefully. So she says narcissism came to mind when you spoke, and the increase, which would mean increase in workplaces too. And these adaptive styles, historically termed addictions or so-called mental illness, have an impact on relationships, which adds to the disengagement that you mentioned. What are your thoughts on this?
Definitely. I think that part of that is the depersonalization of the world in terms of what the internet, what AI and so forth is also creating, because our empathy levels have definitely changed. Empathy is extremely important as a leader. We know this, but our workplaces are geared up to almost not allow for empathy. It is sometimes viewed as a weakness. I hear so many people, especially leaders, talk about empathy. No, it's a weakness. If I show empathy or compassion, I may come across as weak. and my team will not be performing as strong, or my boss will think I am soft on them, or I hear that in coaching. And that's unfortunate. It really is, because empathy, we know that empathy is part of creating that psychological safe environment. And yes, I'm not saying that the lack of empathy necessarily is related to the question of narcissism, but I think that there is a depersonalization. People are so driven for their KPIs, they are so driven to give the results that it is impossible for them to consider at times the human element. And we also know from neuroscience that um, the parts of the brain that work with achievement, that work with achieving goals, that's focused on process and needing to bring in the revenue for the organization, is not online at the same time as the parts of the brain that's human focused. That's about the softness of the empathy side of the leader's role. So leadership, a better leader in terms of transformational leadership, has high perspective taking, has higher empathy. And transformational leadership has been going on for a really long time from an academic and a practice perspective. But it appears that we have not even reached that level. And now academics and even certain leadership practitioners are talking about a level above transformational leadership, which is supposed to help us in this current industrial revolution for, and in terms of the AI world, which is even more transformational than what we originally have worked with. And I don't think leaders are even touching on that. And this shows us how ingrained certain practices can be and how long it will take for them to change. So the concepts of neuroscience, applied neuroscience, neuropsychotherapy, has such value and potential in terms of helping these shifts and to overcome these shifts that leaders are struggling with. They themselves are confused as to where they should be and what they should be doing, because so many leadership theories are thrown at them. So from this perspective, it gives them a scientific support and a foundation of how to approach leadership from a very different perspective that will work with their people. And we know that because we work in this field. So we are aware of that, and the research is saying that as well. So things have changed a lot for leaders, and there's a lot of pressure on them as well.
Yeah, and it makes me think about that obviously when we're under stress, which, you know, and you've been highlighting this, it obviously becomes more difficult to form new habits, and you fall back on your default behaviors. So maybe you can touch a little bit on that, you know, how do we help leaders to form new helpful habits and start practicing these new techniques that they're learning, especially under stress?
Yes. And firstly, we know that when we are under stress, we don't learn as well. So extremely important to ensure that the conditions for learning are present. And we're talking neuroplasticity. There's certain conditions required in order to have neuroplasticity take place. It is about practice. It's about self-awareness. Leaders first need to I would say, have the opportunity for education around these practices, and then they need to start doing them themselves on a daily basis. So when we talk about the fact that leaders need to be more resilient, for instance, which is what a lot of them are struggling with, there's so many building blocks related to resilience. And if we talk about self-regulation as one of them, let's talk about that as one of them as an example. Yeah, mindfulness, as much as people don't like the word, they sometimes say this sounds too iffy. It's not something that is supposed to be in an organization. But mindfulness is extremely valuable. We know that. The neuroscience tells us it is significantly helpful. I use it in coaching and I use it in training as well with leaders. But it is about practicing that. It's about creating self-awareness and not just saying, yes, yes, mindfulness, I know what it is, but to actively practice it in the moment. So taking stock of oneself is a starting point, and then the awareness and knowing the obviously the information related to these approaches and techniques. The leader needs to ensure that they, on a daily basis, practice for behavioral change, because it won't happen if you don't give it the attention that it should, that it deserves. And this makes it difficult for them because they don't have time. They are busy, they are under stress. So it is, to a certain extent, a vicious cycle, because you want to intervene, they become stressed, which impacts the ability to learn, impacts the ability to stop, take a pause. What did I just say? Was that the right way of approaching the situation? Which would immediately provide a neural context for change if they take that moment to think about it, if they take that moment to actually see what really happened, what is going on in my body, and to understand that these are not mutually exclusive. The brain and the body does work together, and that is even a concept that leaders find difficult or struggle with. So I think a lot of education and then the self-awareness that has to take place first, and then the practice of the techniques in the moment would be crucial.
Yeah, it's the irony of this vicious cycle, isn't it? That if you don't stop to refuel, you're just going to get worse and worse and worse, and everything is going to become more and more and more difficult. So, and that's obviously where the education is so important as a first step towards the realization that nothing will happen. And I'm glad you brought up mindfulness. It was actually part of the program that I did as well with King's, about the neuroscience of mindfulness, because it is such an important tool. And not just a tool, but it's a lifestyle, isn't it? That heightened self-awareness. So with neuroscience being on everyone's lips these days, it seems the buzzword of the moment, right? What is the biggest misconception about neuroscience-informed coaching that you've come across in your work?
Sure. People think it's purely about neuroplasticity, and that is something that can take place really quickly and easily. Rewire is the word of the day. And unfortunately, yes, it's part of the process, but it is so much deeper. It's one tiny aspect. That's definitely one that I have seen a lot. Obviously, coaching in itself needs to look at how neuroscience can benefit it and change it. But misconceptions around coaching is definitely if I teach you how to breathe, if I teach you how to do mindfulness or meditate, then that's all part of the process of neuroscience coaching. So that is unfortunate if that's the only techniques that they want to use or think it is. It really, as we know, is significantly deeper. And we have to be careful, obviously, of what is out there and make sure that we read information that is evidence-based, scientific, researched, and so forth, for sure.
Yeah. I've got so many more questions, and I'm sure the audience does as well, because it's a fascinating topic that we can build a whole program on. But I just wanted to finish up and just asking you a little bit about your future vision. So obviously we're based in the UAE, where this region is moving at a very fast pace in terms of innovation and how things are changing. And of course, that's happening globally as well. And I think leadership, as we've been discussing, is shifting from just managing those systems to elevating consciousness around how to operate in this unknown world. But so what's your vision of the future of leadership? Can keeping all of this in mind, where do you think we'll see leadership development and leadership go in the next few years?
I think it's going to become more complex. Definitely, it is going to continue to become more complex because leaders have to deal with so much. And for our region in the UAE, this region, as you said, Maria, is so advanced, and the pace of adopting new technology and new systems is really faster than probably many other areas of the world. And I think it's important to ensure that we don't leave people behind, that there is maybe the leaders of the country that have a particular vision, and whether that all the way goes through to everyone and the companies that function within this country, whether they can keep up with that is really important. And it's up to the leadership. It is that pause of understanding where we're at and what do we really want to achieve here and how does it benefit everyone. So there is a bit of fear in me in terms of how AI and the quick adoption of AI impacts employees and humans in general, because we're also extremely fascinated by it, but there's the human element, there's the ethics, there's everything else, and there's so much one can say about it, but from a neuroscience perspective and how it affects the brain. So leadership really needs to maybe, I would say, have a look at itself, definitely. Where does it need to be? What does it want to be in this region as well? And I think that there is a lot of opportunity, though. There's a huge amount of opportunity because there's a willingness. There's a willingness to learn. There's a willingness to understand. And also now in our region, mental health in particular is something that is coming to the fore. It's a lot less stigmatized within the culture, within the country. It provides an opportunity. It provides a window that we can come through to be able to bring our work as applied neuroscience practitioners to the fore. And definitely need to take advantage of that and support organizations from that perspective. I think something else in our region is also that there is a large divide where you have certain companies that's moving at significant pace, very sophisticated, but then there's a lot of companies that's just not there and they cannot keep up with that, and they will require a different type of leadership and support from a neuroscience perspective. So that's the beauty of this, that it can cater to the type of environment that we're working within as well. And it doesn't matter at what point they are at. There is a way of working with those individuals and leaders.
Yeah, I think it's, I think it's very clear what you're saying. And I think it's also becoming more clear that the organizations that will thrive in the future are the ones that really understand this simple truth that a regulated brain and nervous system where you can operate from that knowledge, awareness, and application are the ones that will have higher brain performance, higher competitiveness and connection, and ultimately outperform those who might get left behind if you're not taking the right approach to this very complex, as you say, world. Any final thoughts that you want to leave our audience with, or any final questions from anyone before we wrap up?
From my side, I would say just remain curious. And I think we have a field that is developing, that's new, and remain curious and open to what is possible. That is what I would say, definitely. Even if you have been trained in different modalities or different fields, allow neuroscience to integrate with that. That's the advice, especially to coaches, that I would give, or people that work within the leadership development space, for sure.
So we have a great question from Lee as well. Thank you so much, Lee. So what neuro psychotherapeutic strategies would you suggest for helping individuals deal with shame especially in terms of reaching burnout and feeling constantly overwhelmed? Such a great question and so prevalent.
It is, and shame is actually very much linked to trauma as well, or some traumatic experience. Probably memory reconsolidation techniques, which is very specific and has a particular protocol in itself, coherence therapy, where you deal with basically what is going on in the brain, predicting that that level of shame needs to be present for whatever the payoff is for the individual. So this is really in a nutshell, trying to explain this briefly, but definitely working with coherence therapy or memory reconsolidation techniques in order to change the outcome of the prediction in the brain so that that is not present any longer, or that the emotional result of that feeling is not present any longer. So it's a little bit deeper than my explanation in the interest of time, but I'm happy to chat with Lee afterwards or separately on that.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Liesl, today for sharing your nuggets of wisdom and for really highlighting the importance of this work and that you're doing, and for our applied neuroscience community. I love the sense of remaining open and curious. And I also love the fact that we start to realize more and more how important this work is in shaping the future of our workplaces to build a better world where all of us can thrive and feel better and produce better results for our organizations as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, and thank you to all of you who joined in and are listening to our conversation, and we hope to have many more with you in the future. Yeah, so thank you, and we'll see you